This is the story of Vovinam, a martial art so dangerous both colonial and communist governments tried to purge it from the earth, but only succeeded in pushing it underground. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what Vovinam is and why generations of governments feared this martial art more than they did weapons. To understand why Vovinam was banned, we first have to understand why it was created. We begin in Hanoi, North Vietnam, 1938. At this time, Vietnam was a part of French Indochina. Decades of colonial rule had left Vietnamese society fractured, with young people caught between assimilation into French culture and a growing movement of resistance. Into this environment stepped Nguyen Loc. He was well educated, patriotic and committed to physical culture. He studied traditional Vietnamese fighting systems alongside Chinese and Sino-Vietnamese Kung Fu, as well as judo and other Japanese martial arts. Eventually, he decided to develop these elements of striking, grappling and weapons into something unique. But his goal wasn't simply to create a new fighting style. He envisioned a modern Vietnamese martial art, one capable of producing strong, disciplined and resilient citizens at a time when any kind of strength or unity was dangerous. He began teaching small groups of friends and acquaintances. Then in 1940, Nguyen Loc and some of his students gave a demonstration of this martial art at the Hanoi Opera House, and the response they were greeted with was overwhelming. Soon after, he was invited to teach at the Hanoi École Normale, and Vovinam spread rapidly among students and intellectuals. And this wasn't just physical training, it was identity building. And that's when the authorities started paying attention. To the French colonial government, Vovinam was highly suspicious. They saw organised groups of young Vietnamese training together under a philosophy of patriotism and self-improvement. The art quickly became associated with anti-French sentiment, and that made it dangerous. By the early 1940s, Vovinam was officially prohibited. Schools were shut down and Nguyen Loc was ordered to suspend any teaching. But the ban had the opposite of the desired effect. Vovinam went underground. Practicing the art itself became an act of quiet resistance. And when the First Indochina War erupted in 1946, many Vovinam practitioners found themselves directly involved. Vovinam had survived its first ban, but its hardest test was still yet to come. After the French defeat in the early 1950s, Vietnam gained independence, but this came at a cost. In 1954, the Geneva Accords split Vietnam in two, creating a northern and a southern country. Possibly concerned about the level of his influence in the north, Nguyen Loc relocated to South Vietnam, and in 1955, Vovinam opened its first training centre in Saigon. Here the art flourished. Vovinam became a symbol of southern Vietnamese culture and pride. By the 1960s, it was widely taught and even incorporated into some of the education programs in public schools. But everything changed again on April 30th, 1975. This was of course the fall of Saigon, and Vietnam was once again reunified under a communist government. The new regime was deeply suspicious of organisations that had a strong foothold in the south of the country, especially one with thousands of well-trained practitioners, a clear hierarchy and strong cultural connection. So Vovinam was outlawed for the second time. Schools were closed, senior masters were silenced, some were even sent to re-education camps, while others trained in secrecy or even fled the country. But just like before, Vovinam refused to disappear. After 1975, many Vietnamese masters carried the art abroad. And ironically, the martial art once suppressed by the French colonial government found one of its strongest footholds in France. By the late 1970s, the hardline version of Vietnamese communism was starting to fade, and the government gradually reversed course. Vovinam was re-legalised and reframed, no longer as a political movement, but as a physical and cultural practice developed by the people for the people. Today, Vovinam is practiced by more than 2 million people in over 50 countries. In 2023, it was recognised by UNESCO as a part of Vietnam's intangible cultural heritage, taking it full circle from a banned resistance martial art to a global symbol of identity. Quick question before we talk about the technical aspects. Have you ever seen or trained in Vovinam? Let me know in the comment section down below. So what exactly made Vovinam such a threatening fighting style? First of all, Vovinam is a complete system built around 4 core elements. Striking, hand and foot techniques similar to Kung Fu or Karate, combined with fast and aggressive elbows and knees, influenced by the Khmer kickboxing styles of Southeast Asia. Grappling, throws, takedowns and joint locks, adapted from Vietnamese folk wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu and other Japanese styles. Weapons, training with staves, halberds, swords, knives and small blades, and most notably a distinct Vietnamese style of sword fighting. And competition. This competitive format utilises kickboxing style rules but also awards points for throws and takedowns, emphasising balance, control and clean execution. This competitive element helped Vovinam survive into the modern era, allowing it to be reframed as a legitimate combat sport rather than a pure self-defense style. But what has truly become Vovinam's signature are the scissor techniques. These can be performed both on the ground or flying through the air, using the legs to capture an opponent and take them down. These techniques in particular are useful because they allow smaller practitioners to take down far larger opponents using the strongest parts of the body, the legs, the core and torso rotation. Folklore traces these scissor techniques back to medieval Vietnamese combat, though this likely reflects later myth making than actual history. Whether ancient or not, this technique emphasises one of Vovinam's key principles: balance between hard and soft, blending the fluidity of internal martial arts with the strength and power of external fighting styles. Balance between mental and physical practice and development, and balance between preserving tradition and being open to change. That philosophy is clearly visible in the uniform of the style, which is a Japanese-influenced gi dyed light blue instead of white, symbolising unity and peace. In many ways, Vovinam was ahead of its time. It was an early form of hybrid martial arts, borrowing what worked from some styles and discarding what didn't, and all of that being shaped into something which was distinctly Vietnamese. So why was Vovinam considered so dangerous? Because it didn't just create skilled fighters. It gave people the physical strength of self-defense and the mental framework to believe in fighting for something larger than themselves. And in doing so, Vovinam proves that a martial art can be more than just combat. And yes, today some of the techniques we see in Vovinam look a little acrobatic and over-the-top theatrical, but after sparring with hundreds of Vovinam fighters myself, I can tell you this: many of them have no problem keeping pace with Muay Thai, Karate, or even MMA fighters. Some movements may look flashy and unorthodox, but the strength, skill and practice behind it all is very real. If you enjoyed this deep dive into martial arts history, consider subscribing to the channel or check out my book on Vietnamese martial arts. I'll put a link in the description, and let me know your thoughts. Which martial art with a wild history should we dive into next? Until next time, train hard, stay safe, thanks for watching.